Sometimes life gives you a second chance when you least expect it. For Calan, a 48-year-old single father barely holding things together, that moment came on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. He was at Sterling's Café, waiting for his coffee, when he spotted his ex-wife walking through the door. Panic set in. Without thinking, he turned and hugged the nearest person, a complete stranger. She didn't push him away. She simply smiled and played along. What Calan didn't know was that this woman had a secret. Genevieve was a millionaire who chose to live quietly, blending into everyday life. Their accidental meeting would change everything for both of them. But could a moment born from desperation turn into something real? Before we continue, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The alarm clock buzzed at 5:30, the same as it did every weekday morning. Calan reached over and silenced it with practiced efficiency, careful not to let it ring long enough to wake Rosie in the next room. His daughter needed her sleep. 4th grade was harder than he remembered from his own childhood, and she stayed up too late most nights working on her projects. He swung his legs out of bed, feet finding the worn carpet, and padded quietly to the bathroom. The face in the mirror looked older than 48 some mornings. Lines had deepened around his eyes over the past 2 years since Diane left. Not that he blamed her entirely. Their marriage had been unraveling long before she accepted that promotion in Seattle. He just wished she'd wanted to take Rosie with her, or at least visit more than twice a year. The apartment was small but clean. Calan took pride in that. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that opened into a living room barely large enough for a couch and television. The walls were covered with Rosie's artwork, crayon drawings from when she was 6, watercolors from 3rd grade, and now more sophisticated sketches of buildings and bridges. His daughter wanted to be an architect. Calan made sure to encourage that dream, even when he worried about the cost of college, still 8 years away. By 6:15, he had coffee brewing and was pulling eggs from the refrigerator. Rosie emerged at 6:30, hair tangled from sleep, wearing her favorite pajamas with rockets on them. She'd had those pajamas for 2 years now, and they were getting too small, riding up her ankles. He needed to buy her new ones, but it would have to wait until next paycheck. "Morning, Dad," she mumbled, climbing onto one of the 2 mismatched chairs at their small kitchen table. "Morning, sweetheart." "Scrambled or fried?" "Scrambled, please." They ate together in comfortable silence, the way people do when they've shared countless mornings and know each other's rhythms. Rosie had his dark hair and serious eyes, but her smile, when it appeared, was pure sunshine. She smiled less since Diane left. That was something else that kept Calan awake some nights. After Rosie left for school, Calan returned to the apartment and changed into his work clothes. Dark blue pants, a matching shirt with his name embroidered over the pocket. He was the maintenance supervisor at Riverside Community Center, a job he'd held for 6 years. The pay was modest but steady, and the benefits covered their basic health insurance. The community center was a 10-minute drive. He clocked in at 8:05, waved to the front desk staff, and checked his work orders for the day. Broken toilet in the women's locker room, flickering lights in the gymnasium, a complaint about the heating system in the children's playroom. The usual. "Morning, Calan." Beverly appeared beside him, holding her own clipboard. She was 53, had worked at the center for a decade, and had become something of a friend over the years. "Morning, Bev. You look exhausted. Rosie had a nightmare last night." Took a while to get her back to sleep. Beverly's expression softened. "That girl's been through a lot." "You both have." The day passed in its familiar rhythm. Fix things, check things, make sure the building kept running. Calan was good at his work, patient, thorough, always willing to stay late if something needed immediate attention. During his lunch break, he sat in his car and ate the sandwich he'd packed, then used his phone to do preliminary work for his evening job. Freelance bookkeeping for small businesses. It was tedious work but flexible, something he could do after Rosie went to bed. His phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Demir, their elderly neighbor. "Rosie, home safe. We're having tea. Come by when you're done." Calan smiled. Mr. Demir was a blessing. The old man had emigrated from Turkey 40 years ago, raised 3 children, buried a wife, and now lived alone in the apartment next door. He'd appointed himself Rosie's honorary grandfather, watching her for the hour between when school ended and when Calan got home. He refused payment, said it gave him purpose. At 4:30, Calan pulled into the parking lot of their apartment complex. He knocked on Mr. Demere's door. The old man answered with his usual warm smile, white mustache twitching with amusement. "Ah, Calan, come in, come in. Your daughter is beating me at chess again." Rosie sat at Mr. Demere's small dining table, studying a chessboard with intense concentration. She'd learned the game from the old man 6 months ago and had taken to it with surprising aptitude. "Checkmate," Rosie announced quietly after a few moments. Mr. Demere studied the board, then laughed. "I am outmatched. Perhaps tomorrow you'll give your old friend a chance to redeem himself." "Tomorrow," Rosie agreed, grinning. Back in their own apartment, Calan helped Rosie with her homework while starting dinner. Spaghetti with jarred sauce, simple, filling, affordable. They ate together at their small table, and Rosie told him about her day. After dinner, they cleaned up together. Rosie washed, Calan dried. The dishwasher had broken 8 months ago, and replacing it wasn't in the budget. Hand washing was fine. It gave them time to talk. "Dad," Rosie's voice was careful, "do you ever think about dating anyone?" The question caught him off guard. He fumbled the plate he was drying. "What makes you ask that? Some kids at school were talking about their parents dating." "I just don't want you to be lonely." His throat tightened. "I'm not lonely, Rosie. I have everything I need right here." After she finished her homework and took her bath, Calan tucked her into bed, reading from an architect book she'd brought home from the library. When her breathing deepened into sleep, he kissed her forehead and retreated to the living room. His laptop waited on the coffee table. 3 businesses needed their monthly books reconciled. Calan made himself fresh coffee and settled in for the long evening ahead. Numbers had always made sense to him, clean, logical, predictable. By 11, his eyes were burning and his back ached. He stood at the window for a moment, looking out over the parking lot. Tomorrow was Tuesday, his one small luxury. For the past year, Calan had claimed Tuesday afternoons for himself. He clocked out at 3 instead of 5, picked up Rosie from school, dropped her with Mr. Demere, and spent 40 precious minutes at Sterling's Café. Just him, a cup of good coffee, and the newspaper. He looked forward to Tuesdays more than he cared to admit. The café was warm and familiar, the coffee was excellent, and for those 40 minutes, he could pretend he was just a regular person taking a break. Not a man constantly calculating pennies and stretching paychecks. Calan brushed his teeth, checked that the front door was locked, and fell into bed. His wallet sat on the nightstand, worn leather, purchased 12 years ago, stuffed with receipts and a few crumpled bills. Inside was a picture of Rosie from last year's school photo day. He looked at it every night before turning off the light. His last thought before sleep claimed him was the same one that ended most of his days. He was doing his best. He was showing up for Rosie every single day. He was keeping them afloat. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that had to be enough. Tomorrow was Tuesday. He'd have his coffee, and for 40 minutes he'd let himself just breathe. Tuesday arrived with clear skies and a crispness in the air that promised autumn was finally settling in. Calan moved through his morning routine with a lightness he couldn't quite explain. Maybe it was knowing he had his cafe time to look forward to. Maybe it was the way Rosie had hugged him extra tight that morning before heading to the bus stop. Small things, but they mattered. Work passed quickly. A clogged drain, a thermostat that needed adjusting, routine maintenance on the HVAC system. At 2:30, Beverly caught him washing his hands at the utility sink. "Leaving early today?" she asked, though she knew the answer. "Tuesday," he confirmed. "Your sacred coffee time. Don't let me keep you." He changed out of his work shirt, pulled on a clean button-down he kept in his locker, and drove to Rosie's school. She was waiting by the flagpole with 2 other girls, laughing about something. When she saw his car, she waved goodbye to her friends and climbed in. "How was your day?" Calan asked as they pulled away from the curb. "Good. We're starting a unit on the solar system in science. And Mrs. Keogh said my essay about buildings was really creative." "That's wonderful." "Sweetheart." He dropped her at Mr. Demere's, exchanged a few words with the old man, and drove the 6 blocks to Sterling's Café. The parking was always tricky this time of day, but he found a spot half a block away. Walking toward the café, he felt that familiar sense of anticipation. 40 minutes of peace. 40 minutes that belonged to him alone. The bell above the door chimed as he entered. The café was moderately busy. A handful of students with laptops, a couple sharing pastries, an older woman reading a book in the corner. Kendrick was behind the counter, grey hair pulled back in a ponytail, wiping down the espresso machine. "Calan!" "Right on time." "Black coffee." "You know it. Got some fresh lemon cake too if you're interested." "I'm always interested." Calan paid, left a modest tip, and took his usual table by the window. The newspaper was already waiting. Kendrick always saved him a copy. He settled in, took his first sip of coffee, and felt his shoulders drop an inch. This was what he needed. This simple moment of normalcy. He was halfway through an article about the city council's budget proposals when the bell chimed again. He didn't look up immediately, too focused on the numbers being discussed. But then he heard a laugh, bright and familiar in a way that made his stomach clench. Calan's head jerked up. There, walking through the door, was Diane, his ex-wife. She looked different than she had 2 years ago, more polished, more confident, wearing an expensive-looking coat and carrying a designer handbag that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Beside her walked a man in his early 50s, well-dressed, easy smile, hand resting casually on the small of her back. Panic flooded through Calan like ice water. Diane hadn't seen him yet. She was laughing at something the man had said. They were walking toward the counter, completely oblivious to his presence. His heart hammered. He couldn't be here. Couldn't sit here and watch her order coffee with someone new. Couldn't endure the inevitable awkward conversation if she noticed him. Questions about Rosie, forced pleasantries. That look in her eyes that said she'd made the right choice leaving. Without thinking, Calan stood. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. A few people glanced his way. Diane was still focused on the menu board, hadn't heard. He needed to leave, but she was between him and the door. He'd have to walk right past her. His eyes darted around desperately. There had to be another exit. A back door. Anything, but Sterling's was small, intimate. Just the front entrance. Then he saw her. A woman standing near the counter, waiting for her order. She had her back to him, dark hair pulled into a simple ponytail, grey sweater, jeans. Nothing remarkable except that she was close, and she was his only option. Calan moved before his rational mind could stop him. 3 quick steps across the cafe floor. The woman must have sensed his approach, because she started to turn. But by then, he was already there. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, in what he desperately hoped looked like an embrace between 2 people who knew each other. She stiffened. Of course she did. He was a complete stranger. "I'm so sorry," Calan whispered urgently near her ear. "Please just go with this for a moment. My ex-wife, I can't, please." For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The woman was frozen in his arms, and Calan was certain she was about to scream or shove him away or call for help. He'd just assaulted a stranger in a coffee shop because he couldn't handle an awkward encounter. What was wrong with him? But then something unexpected occurred. The woman's rigid posture softened. She turned her head slightly, enough that he could see her profile, elegant features, intelligent eyes, a small smile playing at the corner of her mouth. "Hello, darling," she said, her voice carrying just enough volume for nearby people to hear. She placed her hand over his, where they rested against her stomach, and the gesture was so natural, so convincing, that Calan almost believed they actually knew each other. He glanced toward the counter. Diane was ordering now, pointing at something in the pastry case. Her companion was pulling out his wallet. Neither of them had looked their direction. "Thank you," Calan breathed. The woman gently extracted herself from his embrace and turned to face him fully. She was striking, not in a conventional magazine way, but in a way that made you want to keep looking. Mid-40s, he guessed. Slight smile lines around her eyes. Something in her gaze that suggested she'd lived enough life to find humor in unexpected situations. "Ex-wife?" she asked quietly, her tone more amused than judgmental. Calan nodded, embarrassed heat creeping up his neck. I didn't expect. You weren't expecting to see her? The woman glanced past him toward the counter. The one in the expensive coat? That's her. And you panicked, spectacularly. The woman's smile deepened. We've all been there. Would you like to sit down? I think you need a moment. Calan stared at her, confused. You're not angry. I just grabbed you. You apologized first. And you didn't hurt me. She tilted her head slightly. Besides, you look like you might pass out. Come on. She gestured toward his table. They sat across from each other just as Diane and her companion collected their order. Diane's gaze swept across the cafe, seemed to pause on Calan for one terrible second, then moved on. She and her companion headed toward a table on the opposite side of the room. She hadn't recognized him. Or maybe she simply didn't care. You're safe, the woman said gently. She didn't see you. Calan let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. I'm sorry. I don't do things like this, like hug strangers in coffee shops, like anything remotely spontaneous or crazy. Well, the woman leaned back in her chair. There's a first time for everything. I'm Genevieve, by the way, Calan. He managed a weak smile. And I owe you everything. Kendrick appeared at their table with a mug of coffee. Your usual, Genevieve. And I threw in a croissant. You barely ate yesterday. You're too good to me. Kendrick! Genevieve accepted the mug with genuine warmth. That's what my wife says. The older man winked and retreated to the counter. Calan watched this exchange, still trying to process what had just happened. This woman, this complete stranger, had not only played along with his desperate charade, but was now sitting with him as if they were old friends. You come here often. Enough that Kendrick knows your order, he observed. Most Tuesdays. Sometimes Thursdays if the week has been particularly trying. She took a sip of her coffee, studying him over the rim of her mug. So, Calan, tell me what brings a man to such desperate measures in a quiet coffee shop on a Tuesday afternoon. He should leave, should gather his newspaper, finish his coffee, and get back to his normal, predictable life. But something about her presence, calm, non-judgmental, genuinely curious, made him stay. It's complicated, he started. The best stories usually are. Calan found himself talking. About the divorce 2 years ago, about Diane's ambition and his own limitations, about how he'd thought they'd built something together, only to realize she'd been building an exit strategy. He didn't mention Rosie. That felt too private, too precious to share with a stranger. But he talked about the shock of the separation, the adjustment to single life, and how he'd carefully constructed his routines to keep himself steady. Tuesdays are mine, he explained. 40 minutes where I can just be a person, not someone's ex-husband or someone's employee. Just me, coffee, and the newspaper. Genevieve listened without interrupting, her attention complete and unhurried. When he finished, she nodded slowly. And then your past walked through the door and disrupted your sanctuary. Exactly. With a new man in tow. That too, she glanced across the café to where Diane sat with her companion, both of them absorbed in conversation. She looks happy. She does. Does that bother you? Calan considered the question honestly. Not the way you might think. I'm not in love with her anymore. I don't think I was for a long time before she left. But seeing her like that, so put together, so moved on, it reminds me of everything I'm not. And what are you not? Successful, wealthy, free to just start over somewhere new. He laughed without humor. I'm stuck in neutral while everyone else is speeding past. Genevieve was quiet for a moment, her fingers wrapped around her mug. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. You know what I see? A man who shows up, who has routines and commitments and probably responsibilities he doesn't talk about, who works hard enough to be tired on a Tuesday afternoon. That's not stuck, Calan. That's showing up for your life. Something in her words struck deep. He looked at her, really looked at her, and wondered who this woman was, this stranger who'd let him embrace her and then offered him kindness instead of judgment. You're very understanding. For someone I just ambushed, I have experience with difficult divorces. A shadow passed across her face, there and gone in an instant. And I know what it's like to need a sanctuary. To have one place where you can just breathe. Is that why you come to Sterling's? part of it. I like the anonymity, the normalcy. No expectations, no performance. Just coffee and quiet. She smiled, and he noticed the simple silver watch on her wrist, elegant but understated, like everything else about her. Until strange men start hugging me anyway. Despite everything, Calan laughed. It surprised him, genuine laughter here now, with his ex-wife 20 feet away, and his life still a complicated mess. But something about Genevieve's presence made it possible. They talked for another 20 minutes, the conversation flowing easily from coffee preferences to favorite books to the weather. It was surface level but comfortable, like talking to an old friend you'd lost touch with and were slowly rediscovering. Across the cafe, Diane and her companion finished their drinks and left without ever looking in Calan's direction. "She's gone," Genevieve said quietly. "You survived." Calan checked his phone. He'd been at the cafe for 35 minutes. He needed to pick up Rosie from Mr. Demir's soon. The real world was calling him back. "I should go," he said reluctantly. "But thank you. For everything. For being kind when you had every right not to be. We're all just trying to get through the day." Genevieve stood when he did, graceful and unhurried. "Perhaps we'll run into each other again." "I hope so," Calan said, and meant it. Walking to his car, he felt lighter than he had in months. The encounter had been mortifying, yes, completely out of character, but something about it, about her, had shifted something in him. He'd been seen, if only for a few minutes, as a complete person, not as someone's father or ex-husband or employee. Just Calan. The silence in the car felt different as he drove to Mr. Demir's apartment. Not heavy or uncomfortable, just contemplative. He kept replaying the conversation in his mind. The panic, the impulse, Genevieve's unexpected grace. Her words echoed, "You're showing up for your life," was he. Most days it felt like he was just surviving, moving from one obligation to the next without ever catching his breath. But maybe there was dignity in that too. Maybe showing up day after day was its own kind of courage. When he knocked on Mr. Demir's door, Rosie answered with flour on her nose. "We made cookies," she announced. "Well, Mr. Demir made them. I mostly ate the dough. A critical role in any baking operation," the old man called from the kitchen. The apartment smelled of vanilla and butter. Calan accepted a still warm chocolate chip cookie and sat at the small table while Rosie gathered her backpack and jacket. "You seem lighter today," Mr. Demir observed. "Your Tuesday ritual went well?" "It was unexpected," Calan said carefully. "But good." "Yes, good." The old man's eyes twinkled with curiosity, but he didn't press. That was one of the things Calan appreciated about him. Mr. Demir knew when to speak and when to simply be present. Back at their own apartment, Rosie spread her homework across the kitchen table while Calan started dinner. As he chopped vegetables, his mind wandered back to Sterling's. Genevieve had been easy to talk to. Not in the forced way of people making small talk, but genuinely interested. She'd listened without judgment, without offering unwanted advice. That evening, after homework and dinner, after the dishes were washed and dried, Rosie looked at Calan with the expression she wore when working up to something important. "Dad?" Her voice was careful. "You're smiling more today." "Am I?" "Yeah, did something good happen at the cafe?" Calan considered how much to share. "I met someone. Had a nice conversation. A friend?" "Maybe. I don't know yet." Rosie studied his face, then smiled. "I think you should have more friends, Dad. You work too much. Now you sound like Mr. Demir. He's very wise," she said seriously. After Rosie was asleep, Calan sat with his laptop for bookkeeping work, but his concentration kept drifting. He thought about Genevieve's simple silver watch, the way she'd said, "We're all just trying to get through the day," as if she truly understood what that meant. Most people offered platitudes. She'd offered recognition. He wondered if she really did come to Sterling's regularly, as Kendrick's familiar greeting suggested. The thought of seeing her again brought a warmth to his chest he hadn't felt in years. The next few days passed in their usual rhythm, but something had shifted. Calan found himself looking forward to the next Tuesday with an anticipation that went beyond just his regular cafe visit. He caught himself thinking about Genevieve at odd moments, while fixing a broken door handle at work, while helping Rosie with her math homework. While lying in bed before sleep finally came, on Friday, Beverly caught him humming while fixing a leaky faucet in the staff bathroom. "You're in a good mood," she observed. "Am I not usually?" "You're usually steady, professional. This is different." She leaned against the doorframe. "Should I be worried?" "No, I just had a nice conversation with someone earlier this week. Nothing dramatic. Someone?" Calan focused on tightening a connection, not wanting to meet her eyes. "A woman. At Sterling's. It was just talking, Bev. But good talking." "Yes, good talking." Beverly was quiet for a moment, then said gently, "You know it's okay to have a life beyond work, right? You're allowed to be interested in someone. I'm not. It's not like that. I don't even know if I'll see her again. But you want to," he did. That was the surprising part. After 2 years of carefully constructed solitude, after convincing himself he was fine alone, he wanted to see Genevieve again. Wanted to hear what she thought about books or architecture or the way autumn light fell through cafe windows. "Maybe," he admitted. Beverly smiled. "Good. You deserve that, Calan." The weekend arrived. Saturday brought grocery shopping with Rosie, laundry, cleaning the apartment, and a long walk to the park. Sunday meant meal prep for the week, helping Rosie with a project about the solar system, and afternoon chess with Mr. Demir while Rosie drew sketches of imaginary buildings. Monday dragged. Every hour felt longer than usual, waited with anticipation for Tuesday. Calan told himself he was being ridiculous. Genevieve might not even be there, and if she was, she might not remember him with the same warmth. Their encounter had been pleasant but brief. Perhaps she'd simply been kind to a stranger in distress and thought nothing more of it. Tuesday morning arrived, and Rosie noticed immediately that Calan wore his better jeans and the shirt without a stain on the collar. "You look nice." "Dad, just felt like making an effort. For the cafe." "Maybe." She grinned, delighted. "I hope your friend is there." So did he. More than he wanted to admit, even to himself. The morning at work moved with agonizing slowness. Beverly caught him checking his watch for the 3rd time in an hour. "Just go," she said, shaking her head with amusement. "You're useless today anyway. I still have an hour, and you'll spend it staring at the clock. Go pick up your daughter early. Take your time at the cafe. Live a little, Calan." He hesitated, then made a decision that felt almost rebellious. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." "Now get out of here before I change my mind." Calan changed quickly, surprised by the flutter of nervousness in his stomach. He was 48 years old, a grown man with a daughter and responsibilities. Getting anxious about maybe seeing someone at a coffee shop was absurd. At Rosie's school, she was surprised when he appeared at pick-up early. "Is everything okay?" she asked, climbing into the car. "Everything's fine. I just got done early today." She studied his face, then smiled knowingly. "You're going to the cafe?" "I am. And you're hoping she's there. When did you get so perceptive?" "I've always been perceptive. You just don't usually give me anything interesting to perceive." At Mr. Demir's, Rosie whispered something to the old man that made him look at Calan with raised eyebrows and a broad smile. Great. Now he had 2 people invested in his coffee shop visit. "Go," Mr. Demir said. "Take your time." The drive to Sterling's felt longer than usual. Calan found a parking spot and sat in his car for a moment, gathering himself. This was silly. He was just going for coffee, like he did every week. If Genevieve was there, fine. If not, also fine, except it didn't feel fine. It felt charged with possibility. The bell chimed as he entered. Kendrick was behind the counter and his face lit up. "Calan!" Back again. "The usual?" "Please, take your table." "I'll bring it over." Calan moved toward his usual spot by the window, and that's when he saw her. Genevieve sat at a different table today, closer to the back, reading a book with a plain cover. She wore a cream-colored sweater and jeans, her hair down around her shoulders. She looked up as if sensing his gaze, and her face transformed with a smile. "Calan." She said it like greeting an old friend. "I was hoping you'd be here." His heart did something complicated in his chest. "You were?" "I come here most Tuesdays. Thought there was a chance our schedules might align again." She gestured to the empty chair across from her. "Would you like to join me?" Kendrick appeared with Calan's coffee before he could answer. Oh, good, you found each other. Navy, you want your usual refill? Please, Kendrick. The old man winked and retreated, leaving Calan standing there with his coffee, feeling suddenly awkward. Genevieve was still looking at him with that warm, open expression, waiting. I'd like to join you, Calan said finally. If you're sure I'm not interrupting. You're not. I was just reading to pass the time. She closed her book and set it aside. Besides, I've been curious all week about whether you'd actually come back after last Tuesday's excitement. Calan sat down, wrapping his hands around his mug. I almost didn't. Felt embarrassed about the whole thing. Please don't be. It was actually the most interesting thing that's happened to me in months. Her eyes sparkled with humor. Though I'll admit I've been checking the entrance every few minutes, wondering if you'd appear and grab the nearest person again. I think I've learned my lesson about panic-hugging strangers. Shame. I was considering making it a regular greeting method. Very efficient. They both laughed, and just like that, the awkwardness dissolved. Kendrick brought Genevieve's coffee, and they settled into conversation, as naturally as if they'd been meeting here for years, instead of twice. Genevieve asked about his week, and Calan found himself sharing more than he intended. Not everything, he was still cautious, but enough. The challenges at work, small moments that made him smile, his thoughts about autumn being his favorite season. He mentioned his daughter briefly, carefully, just enough to acknowledge she existed without revealing too much. How old? Genevieve asked gently. 10, 4th grade. That's a wonderful age. Old enough to have real conversations. Young enough to still think you're amazing, Calan smiled. Most days. She's perceptive, though. Notices when I'm stressed or distracted. Sounds like she takes good care of you. She does, better than I probably deserve. In return, Genevieve shared about her week, though Calan noticed she was guarded too. She mentioned working from home, enjoying the flexibility. She talked about a book she'd finished, a documentary she'd watched, her observation that the cafe had the best afternoon light of anywhere in the city. You're good at that, Calan observed. At what? Sharing without really sharing. Talking about your week without revealing much about your life. Genevieve's smile turned slightly rueful. Guilty, old habit, I suppose. Privacy feels precious sometimes. I understand that. He did. After the divorce, after becoming a single father, Calan had learned to guard his private life carefully. But I can tell you this, Genevieve continued, leaning forward slightly. These Tuesday conversations, brief as they are, they're something I look forward to. It's nice to talk to someone without expectations or agendas. Just two people having coffee. Exactly. The 40 minutes passed too quickly. Calan found himself checking his phone reluctantly, knowing he needed to get back to Rosie. You have to go, Genevieve said, noticing. I do. But He paused, gathering courage. Same time next week? Her smile was genuine, reaching her eyes. I'll be here. You can count on it. Walking back to his car, Calan felt something he hadn't experienced in years, anticipation for the future. Not just getting through the next day or week, but actually looking forward to something, to someone. It was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. Tuesday meetings at Sterling's became a pattern over the next month. Calan and Genevieve's connection deepened through conversation. Childhood memories, life philosophies, regrets and hopes. Each week revealed another layer, another piece of who they were beneath the surface. Genevieve shared about her son, Sebastian, who was 28, and worked in sustainable energy overseas. She spoke of him with pride but also wistfulness. They weren't as close as she'd like. Geography and her own past choices creating distance between them. I was focused on building something, she said one afternoon, stirring her coffee slowly. My career, my reputation, my independence. By the time I looked up, he was grown and living his own life. We talk, but there's a formality to it. Like we're friendly colleagues rather than mother and son. Calan related deeply. I worry about that with Rosie, that one day she'll grow up and drift away and I'll have missed something important. You won't, Genevieve said with certainty. Your dedication is evident in the way you talk about her. She'll always know she was loved. The reassurance meant more than Calan could articulate. As October deepened into November, their conversations grew more personal. Genevieve mentioned her divorce, a marriage that had ended 5 years ago when her husband couldn't reconcile her success with his own sense of masculinity. "He wanted me to be smaller," she said simply, "to apologize for achieving things, to defer to him in public. I couldn't do that." "You shouldn't have to," Calan said firmly. "No, but it cost me my marriage and for a while my son's respect. Sebastian thought I chose work over family." She looked out the window, her expression distant. "Maybe I did for a time. I'm still figuring out how to balance it all." One Tuesday in mid-November, Genevieve asked a question that had clearly been building for weeks. "Would you like to meet outside the cafe sometime? Maybe for a walk or dinner?" Calan's heart jumped. This was different, a deliberate step beyond their Tuesday ritual into something more intentional. It thrilled and terrified him in equal measure. "I'd like that," he said. "Though I have to work around Rosie's schedule." "Of course." "What if—" Genevieve hesitated, then continued. "What if I met her? If you're comfortable with that, we could do something together. The three of us." The suggestion caught Calan off guard. He'd been careful about keeping Genevieve separate from his life with Rosie, protecting both of them from complications. But the offer felt genuine, not performative. "Let me think about it," he said carefully. That evening, he brought it up with Rosie during their dishwashing routine. "Remember the woman I've been meeting at the cafe? Genevieve?" "Your friend," Rosie said, handing him a plate to dry. "You talk about her sometimes. She asked if she could meet you. Maybe we could all do something together on Saturday." Rosie's eyes widened with interest. "Really? What would we do?" "I don't know yet. Maybe the park or the museum." "The park," Rosie said immediately. "I want to see what she's like. And if you don't like her—" Rosie considered this seriously. "Then we'll be polite, and you can still be friends with her on Tuesdays. But Dad, I think I will like her. You smile when you talk about her." Saturday arrived with clear skies and cool air. Calan was nervous in a way he hadn't been since his first date with Diane decades ago. He'd suggested the park near the river. Neutral ground, open space, easy to leave if things became awkward. Genevieve arrived exactly on time, wearing casual clothes and carrying a small wrapped package. She approached them with a warm smile, her attention immediately focusing on Rosie. "You must be Rosie. Your dad talks about you all the time." "He talks about you too," Rosie said, her natural shyness giving way to curiosity. Genevieve held out the package. "I hope this is okay. Your dad mentioned you're interested in architecture, and I found something I thought you might like." Rosie unwrapped it carefully, a sketchbook with a leather cover and a set of quality drawing pencils. Her face lit up with genuine delight. "These are amazing." "Thank you. I noticed you like drawing buildings," Genevieve said. "These pencils are good for detail work, for capturing the way light hits structures." Calan was touched by the thoughtfulness, by the fact that Genevieve had been paying attention to things he'd mentioned in passing weeks ago. They spent the afternoon walking the park trails, feeding ducks at the pond, and sitting on benches while Rosie sketched. Genevieve engaged with Rosie genuinely, asking real questions, listening to the answers, never talking down to her. She asked about Rosie's favorite buildings, her dreams of designing bridges someday, her concerns about math class. "Math is the language of architecture," Genevieve said. "Every beautiful building is really just elegant mathematics made visible." Rosie absorbed this perspective with visible excitement. Later, while Rosie played on the climbing structure nearby, Genevieve turned to Calan on the bench. "She's remarkable, wise and kind." "You've done a wonderful job with her." Calan's throat tightened. "I'm just trying not to mess her up. That's what all good parents think." Genevieve reached over and took his hand, the first time they'd touched since that initial embrace in the cafe. The contact sent warmth through him. "But I can see it, Calan. The care you put into every decision, the way you show up for her. She's lucky to have you." The words landed deep in a place that had been hungry for validation. His hand stayed in hers, neither of them pulling away. When they parted ways that afternoon, Rosie hugged Genevieve goodbye, a spontaneous gesture that seemed to surprise and move the older woman. In the car, Rosie was animated. "I really like her, Dad. She's special." "Yes," Calan agreed softly. "She is. That evening he received a text from Genevieve. "Thank you for sharing your afternoon and your daughter. Both are treasures." He responded, "Thank you for seeing us." Lying in bed that night, Calan acknowledged what he'd been avoiding for weeks. He was falling for her. The thought both excited and terrified him. He was still a man with 2 jobs, limited resources, a complicated past. What could he really offer someone like Genevieve? Someone who seemed so composed, so together, so far beyond his everyday struggles. But when he closed his eyes, he could still feel the warmth of her hand in his, and that feeling was worth holding on to, at least for now. The weeks that followed brought a shift in their relationship. They saw each other more frequently now, not just Tuesdays, but occasional weekend afternoons, phone calls in the evening after Rosie went to bed, text messages that made Calan smile at unexpected moments during his workday. Calan introduced Genevieve to his world. She met Beverly at the community center, charming her with questions about the work they did there. She joined them for a walk through his neighborhood, admiring the small gardens people maintained, the sense of community that existed despite modest means. She seemed genuinely interested in his life, asking questions that showed she was paying attention, but Calan occasionally noticed things that didn't quite fit. Her clothes were simple but clearly high quality when you looked closely. She casually mentioned traveling to Portugal last year, visiting museums in Paris. Once, discussing coffee, she referenced a rare Ethiopian blend he'd never heard of. Small details that suggested a life larger than the one she presented. One evening in early December, Genevieve invited Calan to her home for dinner. The invitation felt significant, a crossing of a threshold they'd been approaching for weeks. "Just dinner," she said. "Nothing fancy. But I'd like you to see where I live." Calan arrived with flowers, not expensive, but chosen carefully from a local shop. He'd agonized over the gesture, wanting to be thoughtful without seeming like he was trying too hard. Genevieve lived in a nice neighborhood, nicer than his, certainly, but not ostentatious. Her home was a modest condo in a building with understated elegance. She greeted him at the door with a warm smile, wearing jeans and a soft sweater, looking relaxed and lovely. Inside, the space was decorated tastefully, personal but not cluttered. Books lined one wall. Art hung in thoughtful places. Originals, Calan suspected, though he knew little about such things. Everything spoke of someone with means, but also restraint. "This is beautiful," he said honestly. "Thank you. It's home." She took the flowers with genuine pleasure. "These are lovely. Let me put them in water while you get comfortable." She'd cooked a simple meal, roasted chicken, vegetables, crusty bread from a local bakery. They ate at her small dining table by candlelight, and the intimacy of it, the quiet domesticity, felt both wonderful and slightly overwhelming. Over dinner, their conversation turned deeper. Genevieve asked about his marriage, what had gone wrong. Calan found himself sharing things he rarely spoke about, how he'd felt inadequate as Diane's career advanced, how he'd struggled with feeling left behind, how the divorce had confirmed his deepest fear that he wasn't enough. "That's not failure," Genevieve said softly. "That's 2 people growing in different directions. It happens. Easy to say when you're the one who grew." "I grew alone," she countered. "Success without someone to share it with is just another kind of loneliness." After dinner, they moved to her couch with coffee. The apartment was quiet around them, intimate in a way that made Calan acutely aware of every breath, every small distance between them. "Can I ask you something?" he ventured. "Anything. What do you do? For work, I mean. You've mentioned working from home, but you've never said what that actually is." Genevieve was quiet for a long moment, her coffee cup held between her hands. When she spoke, there was careful weighing in her tone. "I run a company. Several, actually. Consulting, mostly. It's complicated and not very interesting." The answer was vague, deliberately so. Calan noticed but didn't press. Everyone had things they preferred to keep private. Must be successful if it lets you work from home on your own schedule. "I've been fortunate," she said simply. The conversation moved on. But something lingered, a sense of information withheld, of stories not yet told. Calan wondered what she was protecting, why she kept that part of her life so carefully guarded. Later, as the evening wound down, they found themselves sitting closer on the couch. Genevieve's hand rested near his on the cushion between them. The air felt charged with possibility. "I'm glad you came tonight," she said softly. "So am I. This is—" She paused, searching for words. "I haven't felt this comfortable with someone in a very long time." "Neither have I." The moment stretched. Genevieve leaned closer, and Calan met her halfway. Their kiss was gentle, tentative, deepening slowly. It felt like coming home and stepping into the unknown all at once. When they pulled apart, both were slightly breathless. Genevieve searched his eyes. "Is this okay?" Calan nodded. "More than okay." They sat together for another hour, talking quietly, sharing small kisses, building something new between them. When Calan finally left, reluctantly, knowing he needed to get home before Rosie woke and found him gone, he drove through the quiet streets feeling like a different person than the man who'd arrived. Everything had changed. They'd crossed from friendship into something more, and there was no going back now. The next day, Beverly noticed immediately. "You're glowing." "I'm not glowing. You absolutely are." "Things went well with your lady friend?" Calan couldn't suppress his smile. "Yes, very well. Good for you." Beverly squeezed his shoulder. "You deserve happiness, Calan. Don't let fear stop you from reaching for it." That evening, Mr. Demure made similar observations when Calan picked up. "Rosie, you look like a man who's found something worth holding." "On to," the old man said with a knowing smile. "Maybe I have. Then don't let it go. Life is too short for hesitation." That night, after Rosie was asleep, Calan sat by his bedroom window, looking out at the parking lot. His worn leather wallet sat on the nightstand, the same one he'd carried for 12 years, stuffed with receipts and responsibility. Inside was a picture of Rosie, and now, added just this evening, a napkin from Sterling's Café that Genevieve had written her phone number on weeks ago, even though he already had it saved in his phone. Small treasures, marking the life he'd built and the new life beginning to unfold. He was a man with limited means, yes, but he was also a man who showed up, who loved his daughter, who'd somehow found connection with a remarkable woman despite all the reasons it shouldn't work. Maybe that was enough. Maybe he was enough. For the first time in years, Calan allowed himself to believe it might be true. He'd fallen in love with her. That was the truth he couldn't escape. But how could love bridge such an impossible divide? The rest of Sunday passed in a fog. Rosie noticed his mood immediately when he picked her up from Mr. Demure's. "Did you and Genevieve have a fight?" she asked quietly in the car. "Something like that. Are you going to fix it?" Calan glanced at his daughter, her young face so serious, so hopeful. "I don't know if I can, sweetheart." "Why not?" How could he explain to a 10-year-old that sometimes differences weren't just about preferences or personalities, but about entire worlds that didn't overlap? That sometimes caring about someone wasn't enough? "It's complicated," he said finally. That night, after Rosie was in bed, Calan sat at his laptop but couldn't focus on bookkeeping. Instead, he found himself searching for more information about Genevieve Ashford. Article after article painted a picture of an extraordinary woman, brilliant, driven, successful beyond measure. And there he was, a maintenance supervisor barely making ends meet. The contrast was laughable. What had he been thinking? That they could build something real despite the chasm between their lives? That love somehow negated the fundamental differences in their circumstances? He looked at his wallet on the table, worn leather, 12 years old, held together by habit and necessity. It represented everything about his life, practical, limited. Making do Genevieve's world was different, limitless, full of possibilities. He couldn't even imagine the distance between them had always been there. He'd just been too caught up in the warmth of her presence to see it clearly. Now, with the truth exposed, he couldn't unsee it. Every conversation they'd had, every moment they'd shared, all of it recontextualized by the knowledge of who she really was. She'd called it wanting to be seen as just a person. But maybe that was the privilege of the wealthy, getting to choose when to reveal themselves, when to step back into their real lives. Calan closed his laptop and went to bed, but sleep was elusive. His mind replayed their argument, her tears, the hurt in her voice when she'd left. Part of him wanted to call her, to apologize, to find a way forward. But a larger part, the part that had learned through divorce and hardship to protect himself, held back. It better to end it now than to keep building something that would inevitably collapse. Under the weight of their differences, 2 months into their relationship, Calan and Genevieve were navigating the territory of becoming a couple. They were careful around Rosie, but his daughter was clearly attached to Genevieve now, asking when they'd see her next, including her in drawings of People I Love. One Saturday morning, Calan took Rosie to the library for research on her school project about renewable energy. While Rosie browsed the science section, Calan wandered toward the periodicals, thinking he might find something useful for her. A business magazine caught his eye. The cover featured a striking woman in a tailored suit standing against a city skyline. He did a double-take, his heart stopping mid-beat. It was Genevieve. The headline read, "Genevieve Ashford, the tech mogul who disappeared. Inside, her quiet return to philanthropy." Calan's hands trembled as he pulled the magazine from the rack. He found a chair and sank into it, opening to the featured article. His eyes scanned the pages, each sentence landing like a physical blow. Genevieve Ashford, founder and CEO of Ashford Ventures. Net worth estimated at $800 million. Built her fortune through early investments in technology companies, real estate holdings across 3 continents, and a venture capital firm that had launched dozens of successful startups. The article detailed her rise in the business world, her reputation as both brilliant and ruthless in negotiations, her high-profile divorce from tech executive Richard Ashford 5 years ago. There were photos, Genevieve at charity galas in designer gowns, Genevieve speaking at business conferences, Genevieve shaking hands with politicians and CEOs. She looked different in these pictures, polished, powerful, untouchable. The article explained how she'd stepped back from public life 2 years ago, delegating daily operations to focus on philanthropic work. Those who know Ashford say she's seeking a more authentic existence after decades of living in the spotlight, one quote read. Calan felt dizzy. The woman he'd been seeing, who wore simple sweaters and drank coffee at a neighborhood cafe, who'd played along with his desperate embrace, who'd sat on park benches watching his daughter draw, was one of the wealthiest women in the country. "Dad?" Rosie appeared beside him with an armful of books, then noticed his expression. "What's wrong?" Calan quickly closed the magazine, forced a smile that felt like it might crack his face. "Nothing, sweetheart. Just surprised by something I read." "You ready to check out?" At home, after Rosie settled into reading one of her library books, Calan locked himself in the bathroom and looked up Genevieve on his phone. The search results were extensive. Articles about her business deals, photos from charity events, a Wikipedia page detailing her career, videos of her speaking at conferences, articulate and commanding. This was who he'd been seeing. Not just a woman with some money, but someone who existed in a completely different stratosphere. Someone who'd built an empire while he'd been fixing toilets and balancing small business accounts. The gap between them suddenly felt insurmountable. His phone buzzed. A text from Genevieve. "Thinking about you. Coffee Tuesday?" Calan stared at the message. She'd hidden this from him. For 2 months, she'd let him believe she was just a regular person, someone in his league. Had she been laughing at him? Was this some kind of experiment? See how the working-class single father lives. His hands shook as he typed, "Why didn't you tell me?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Then tell you what? About who you are, what you're worth, everything." A long pause. "Then can we talk in person, please?" Calan looked at Rosie through the bathroom door, absorbed in her book. "Tomorrow. We need to talk." They arranged to meet the next morning while Rosie was with Mr. Demir. Calan barely slept that night, his mind churning through everything. The easy conversations, the simple dinners, her interest in his modest life. Had any of it been real? Sunday morning, Genevieve arrived at his apartment. She looked tired, worried, nothing like the powerful executive in those magazine photos. She stood in his small living room, and for the first time, Calan saw the space through different eyes. How cramped it was, how worn the furniture, how limited everything must seem to someone who probably had homes in multiple cities. "I saw the magazine," he said, without preamble. "The article about you. About Ashford Ventures and your $800 million. Genevieve's face went pale. "Calan, why didn't you tell me?" 2 months, Genevieve. 2 months of letting me think you were just—" He gestured helplessly. "Just a normal person." "I am a normal person. You're a billionaire. I have money. That doesn't define who I am, doesn't it?" Calan's voice rose despite his effort to stay calm. "You live in a world I can't even imagine. You've probably spent more on a single dinner than I make in a month. And you let me sit there talking about my struggles like what? Like it was entertaining. That's not fair." Genevieve's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't tell you because I wanted you to know me. Just me, not my money or my reputation or my past. When was the last time someone saw me as just a person, Calan? When was the last time someone wanted to spend time with me because they enjoyed my company, not because of what I could do for them? So this was what? Some kind of authenticity experiment? Slumming it with the working class? Don't," her voice broke, "don't reduce this to that. What we have, what we've built, it's real. How can it be real when it's based on a lie? I never lied to you. You hid the truth. That's the same thing." Genevieve wiped at her eyes. "I was going to tell you. I was waiting for the right time, when we were more established, when I knew you—" She stopped. "When you knew I what? When I knew you wouldn't run. When I knew this—" She gestured between them. "When I knew this mattered enough that you'd stay." Calan laughed bitterly. "Well, you miscalculated. Because all I can think about right now is how I've been completely out of my depth this entire time. I can't compete with your world, Genevieve. I can't give you the life you're used to. I'm not asking you to." She stepped closer. "I left that life. I chose this quiet existence, this neighborhood, this cafe. I chose simplicity because everything else was hollow. And then I met you, and for the first time in years, something felt real. You felt real, but I'm not real to you. I'm just a reminder of some life you think you want, but will never actually fit into." The words hung between them, cruel and final. Genevieve stared at him, hurt written across her face. "If that's what you think of me, of us, then maybe you're right." Her voice was quiet now, defeated. "Maybe I was wrong about everything." She turned toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, my feelings are real. But I understand if you need time." After she left, Calan stood in his small apartment, surrounded by everything that defined his life. Rosie's drawings on the walls, his worn furniture, the wallet on the table with its frayed edges. He felt the weight of inadequacy crushing down on him. Everything he wasn't, everything he couldn't provide, everything that separated him from someone like Genevieve Ashford. He'd fallen in love with her. That was the truth he couldn't escape. But how could love bridge such an impossible divide? A week passed with no contact between Calan and Genevieve. Each day felt heavier than the last. Calan moved through his routines mechanically. Work, parenting, bookkeeping. But the lightness that had characterized the past few months was gone. Rosie noticed everything. She asked about Genevieve constantly at first, then less frequently when Calan's answers remained vague and evasive. Finally, she stopped asking, but the disappointment in her eyes was worse than the questions. At work, Beverly cornered him in the supply closet on Thursday. "What happened?" she demanded. "You look miserable." Calan explained about the magazine, the revelation, the impossible gap between their worlds. Beverly listened, then shook her head slowly. "So she has money. Does that change who she is?" "It changes everything, does it? Or are you just scared?" The question stung because it hit too close to truth. "I'm realistic, Bev. We come from different worlds. You came from the same cafe on the same Tuesday afternoons. That's where you met. That's what matters. That's not enough. Why not? Because you can't buy her expensive things? Because she's more successful than you?" Beverly's voice was sharp now, frustrated. "Calan, I've watched you these past months. You were happy. Really happy, for the first time since I've known you. Are you really going to throw that away because of pride? It's not pride, it absolutely is pride. You're scared that you're not good enough for her, so you're pushing her away before she can figure it out herself. But what if she already knows exactly who you are and wants you anyway? The words haunted Calan for the rest of the day. That evening, Mr. Demir invited him for tea while Rosie did homework. The old man poured 2 cups, then fixed Calan with a knowing look. "You're carrying something heavy," he observed. Calan found himself explaining the situation again. Mr. Demir listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, his weathered face thoughtful. When Calan finished, the old man was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. "Let me tell you a story. 50 years ago, I met a woman. She was from a wealthy family, educated, sophisticated, everything I was not. I was a laborer, barely spoke the language. I loved her, but I was terrified. How could someone like her want someone like me? What happened?" I walked away. Told myself it was impossible, that I was saving us both from inevitable heartbreak. Mr. Demir's eyes grew distant. "She married someone else 6 months later. Someone from her world. I married too, eventually. Had a good life, a good wife. But I never forgot that first woman. Never stopped wondering what might have been if I'd had the courage to try. You're saying I should. I'm saying pride is a lonely companion, my friend. If she makes you happy, if she's good to your daughter, if she chose you despite having every option in the world, what else matters? I can't give her the life she's used to. Perhaps she doesn't want that life. Perhaps she wants yours." Mr. Demir leaned forward. "You think wealth makes someone happy? I've known many wealthy people in my years. Most of them would trade everything for what you have, a child who loves you, work that matters, the ability to be yourself. These are riches money cannot buy." That night, Calan couldn't sleep. Mr. Demir's words echoed alongside Beverly's, different voices, same message. He was letting fear make his decisions. Friday morning brought an unexpected visitor. Rosie came into the kitchen with an envelope. "I wrote something," she said quietly. "For Genevieve. But I wanted you to read it first." Calan opened the letter with trembling hands. Rosie's careful handwriting filled the page. "Dear Genevieve, I don't know if you and my dad are still friends. He won't talk about it, and he's sad all the time now. I wanted you to know that I really liked spending time with you. You were always nice to me, and you listened when I talked about buildings, and you gave me the best sketchbook I've ever had. My dad is a really good person. He works really hard, and he always makes sure I have what I need, even when it's hard. He reads to me every night, and he comes to all my school things, and he's teaching me that showing up for people is the most important thing. I think he's scared because you have a lot of money, and we don't have very much. But that doesn't matter to me, and I don't think it should matter to him either. You were always just Genevieve to us. I hope you come back. We miss you. I miss you. And I think my dad misses you most of all, even though he won't say it. Love, Rosie." Calan's vision blurred as he read. His 10-year-old daughter had seen through all his defenses, all his justifications, straight to the heart of the matter. He was scared. Scared of not being enough. Scared of eventual rejection. Scared of opening himself up to hurt again. But in protecting himself, he'd hurt Rosie. And he'd hurt Genevieve, a woman who'd done nothing wrong except try to find a genuine connection in a world that had probably used her for her wealth her entire life. "Can I send it?" Rosie asked quietly. Calan pulled her into a hug. "Not yet, because I need to talk to her first. To apologize. You're going to fix it." "I'm going to try." Rosie's face brightened with hope. "Good, because I really like her, Dad." "So do I, sweetheart. So do I." That afternoon, Calan called Genevieve. The phone rang 4 times before she answered, her voice cautious. "Calan, can we talk? Please, in person." A pause. "When?" "Now, if you're available." "I can come to you." "Sterling's," she said. "In an hour." Calan arranged for Mr. Demir to watch Rosie, changed into clean clothes, and drove to the cafe with his heart hammering. He arrived first, ordered 2 black coffees, and sat at the table where they'd first talked after his panicked embrace. Genevieve arrived exactly on time. She looked tired, her usual composure shadowed by something that might have been sadness. She sat across from him without speaking, waiting. "I'm sorry," Calan started. "I'm so sorry for how I reacted, for the things I said. You didn't deserve that. You were shocked. I understand." "No, I was scared." He forced himself to meet her eyes. "Scared that I'm not enough. That I can't compete with your world. That eventually you'd realize you'd made a mistake," and his voice broke. "And I'd end up alone again, but this time it would hurt so much more because I'd know what I'd lost." Genevieve's expression softened. "Calan, let me finish, please." He took a breath. "Rosie wrote you a letter. She said something that made me realize I've been an idiot. She said you were always just Genevieve to us. And she's right. When I'm with you, I don't think about money or status or any of that. I just think about how you make me feel. How you see me, really see me, in a way no one else has. I do see you," Genevieve said softly. "That's why I didn't want to tell you about the money. I was afraid you'd stop being yourself around me. That everything would change. It did change. But not because of you. Because of me and my own insecurities." He reached across the table, and she met him halfway, their hands clasping. "I've spent so long feeling like I'm not enough. Not enough for Diane, not enough for Rosie, not enough for life. And then you came along and made me feel like maybe I was. But when I found out who you really are, all those old fears came rushing back. You are enough," Genevieve said firmly. "You're more than enough. Do you think I've spent the last 2 months pretending? Do you think I chose Tuesday afternoons at this cafe because I was bored? I chose you, Calan, not your wallet, not your status. You. The man who panicked and hugged a stranger. The man who talks about his daughter with such love, it makes my heart ache. The man who shows up every single day for the people who matter to him. But I can't give you the life. I don't want that life." Her grip on his hands tightened. "I had that life. It was empty. All the success, all the money, all the power, and I was lonely, desperately, crushingly lonely. I came back here, to this city, to this neighborhood, because I was looking for something real. And then I found you." Calan's throat tightened with emotion. "I'm in love with you. That's the terrifying truth. I'm in love with you, and I don't know how to navigate the gap between our worlds, but I want to try, if you'll let me. If you still want me." Genevieve's eyes filled with tears. "I'm in love with you too. I have been for weeks. And there is no gap, Calan. Just two people who found each other. Everything else is just details we'll figure out together." She stood, pulling him up with her, and they embraced in the middle of Sterling's Café, the place where everything had started with panic and desperation and an impossible hug. Now they held each other with certainty, with choice, with love. Gendrick appeared beside them with fresh coffee. "About time," he said gruffly. "You two have been moping around here long enough. Glad you worked it out." They laughed through their tears, sitting back down, hands still clasped across the table. "So where do we go from here?" Calan asked. "Forward," Genevieve said simply. "Together. We'll figure out the rest as we go. What about the money, the different worlds? We'll navigate it, with honesty this time, full honesty. I'll tell you about my work, my life, all of it. And we'll figure out how to blend our worlds in a way that works for both of us, for all three of us, including Rosie." Calan nodded, feeling something settle in his chest. Not certainty. Life didn't offer that. But hope. Real, tangible hope. That maybe, despite everything, they could build something lasting. "Rosie wants to send you her letter," he said. "I'd love to read it. She misses you. We both do. I missed you too. So much." Genevieve smiled through her tears. "What are you doing tomorrow?" "Nothing that can't be rearranged." "Good. Come to my place. The real one. I want to show you everything, who I really am, what my life looks like, no more hiding. And if it's too much, it won't be. But if it is, we'll figure it out. Together." The word settled between them like a promise. Together. Not him alone, struggling to measure up. Not her alone, hiding who she was. Together, building something new from honesty and love, and the courage to try. Saturday morning arrived with clear winter skies. Calan woke early, nervous in a way that had nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with stepping fully into this new reality. Genevieve had sent him an address the night before. Not the modest condo where they'd had dinner, but somewhere outside the city. Over breakfast, he explained to Rosie where they were going. Genevieve wants to show us her real home, the place where she actually lives. Rosie's eyes widened. Is it going to be really big? Probably. She has a lot of money, sweetheart, more than we ever will. That's something we need to understand and be okay with. I don't care about her money, Dad. I care that she's nice to us, that she makes you happy. Out of the mouths of children, simple wisdom that cut through all his complicated anxieties. They drove for 40 minutes, leaving the city behind. The GPS led them to a gated entrance with an intercom. Calan pressed the button, and Genevieve's voice came through immediately. You came. We did. I'm so glad. Come on up. The gates opened, revealing a long driveway lined with trees. As they rounded a curve, the house came into view, and Calan felt his breath catch. It wasn't ostentatious or showy, nothing like the mansions he'd seen in movies. But it was undeniably grand, stone and glass, nestled into landscaped grounds, with gardens visible even in winter's dormancy. Wow, Rosie breathed from the back seat. Yeah, Calan agreed quietly. Wow. Genevieve was waiting at the front door, wearing jeans and a simple sweater, looking nervous in a way he'd never seen her before. She was letting them see her, all of her, and the vulnerability in that gesture moved him deeply. This is me, she said as they approached, the part I've been hiding. I understand if it's too much. Calan took her hand. Show us. Inside, the house was beautiful but lived in. Expensive furniture mixed with personal touches, books everywhere, photographs on tables, art that looked chosen for meaning rather than investment value. It was clearly the home of someone wealthy, but it was also unmistakably a home. Genevieve gave them a tour, a library that made Rosie gasp with delight. Floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with books, a kitchen that was both professional grade and cozy, a living room with windows overlooking gardens and woods beyond, guest rooms, an office where Genevieve worked, a sunroom filled with plants. You can borrow any books you want, Genevieve told Rosie, who was still mesmerized by the library. Any time. Consider them yours to explore. Rosie looked at her father for permission. Calan nodded, and his daughter disappeared into the stacks with reverent excitement. Alone for a moment, Genevieve turned to Calan. What are you thinking? I'm thinking this is your real life, and I'm trying to figure out where someone like me fits into it. Right here. She gestured around them. This house has been empty except for me for 2 years. Do you know how lonely that is? How meaningless all of this feels without someone to share it with. But what do I bring to this? You have everything. I have things, Calan. I don't have you. I don't have what you and Rosie have. That bond, that love, that sense of family. I don't have someone who sees me as just Genevieve, not Genevieve Ashford with her billions. You bring yourself. That's everything. They stood in her beautiful empty house, and Calan saw it clearly for the first time. Wealth didn't equal happiness. Success didn't equal fulfillment. She had built an empire but still needed the same things everyone needed: connection, love, purpose beyond acquisition. I'm still scared, he admitted. Scared I'll disappoint you, that I'm not sophisticated enough or educated enough or... Stop. Genevieve cupped his face in her hands. I've dated plenty of sophisticated, educated men. They bored me or tried to control me or wanted me for what I could do for their careers. You're the first person in years who wanted to know what I thought about coffee and autumn leaves and the best time of day for quiet contemplation. You're the first person who made me laugh without trying to impress me. You're the first person who felt real. Rosie emerged from the library holding a book about famous architects. Can I really borrow this? It's yours, Genevieve said. Keep it. They spent the rest of the morning together. Genevieve showed them the grounds, the gardens she was planning for spring, the small pond where ducks nested, the trail through the woods she walked when she needed to think. She talked about her work honestly now, the companies she'd built, the investments she'd made, the foundation she was planning to launch that would support single parents in need. "I want your input on that," she told Calan as they walked. "You understand that world better than I ever could. What actually helps? What's just good intentions that miss the mark? You want my advice? I want your partnership. Not just in us, but in making this work matter. Your experience has value, Calan, real value. The offer wasn't charity, it was respect, recognition that what he knew, what he'd lived, had worth beyond a paycheck." Over lunch, simple sandwiches Genevieve had prepared, they talked about logistics, how to blend their lives, whether Calan and Rosie would eventually spend time here, or if Genevieve would continue splitting time between properties, how to help Rosie understand the wealth without letting it change her, or create unrealistic expectations. "I don't want to uproot your lives," Genevieve said. "I want to join them, not replace them." "What does that look like practically?" "However we want it to look. There's no rule book for this, Calan. We write our own story." As afternoon faded toward evening, Calan realized something profound. The gap he'd feared, the impossible distance between their worlds, wasn't actually that wide. They both wanted the same things: love, connection, purpose, a life that mattered. She just happened to have more money than he could imagine, but that was just a detail, not a definition. Several weeks passed as Calan and Genevieve navigated their relationship with new honesty. They established boundaries and routines that respected both their worlds. Genevieve became more present in Calan and Rosie's everyday life: school events, weekend activities, quiet evenings at their apartment. She was careful not to overstep, but her care was evident in countless small ways. The complications came, as they always did, from the practical realities of their different circumstances. Calan's car broke down on a Tuesday morning. The transmission, a repair that would cost $1,500 he didn't have. He called Beverly, explained he'd be late to work, and started calculating bus schedules while his stomach churned with stress. Genevieve called during his lunch break. "How are you?" "Fine," he said automatically, then caught himself. Honesty. They'd promised honesty. "Actually, not fine. My car died. The repair is expensive, and I'm trying to figure out how to manage without it until I can save enough." "Let me help," she said immediately. "Genevieve, please. This is exactly the kind of thing partners help each other with. Let me cover the repair. I can't just take money from you." "Why not?" The question was so simple, but Calan had no good answer. Just pride and old wounds and the voice in his head that said, accepting help meant admitting failure. "Because I need to handle my own problems," he said. "Finally, that's not how relationships work." Genevieve's voice was patient but firm. "We're supposed to support each other. If you were sick, would you let me help? If Rosie needed something, would you accept assistance?" "That's different." "How? How is this different?" They argued for 20 minutes, their first real argument since reconciling. Calan felt his defenses rising, all his old patterns of self-reliance kicking in. He'd handled everything alone for 2 years. He didn't know how to do it any other way. "This isn't about the car," Genevieve said finally. "This is about you not believing you deserve help. About you thinking that accepting anything from me diminishes you somehow. Maybe it does. Then that's something you need to work through. Because I can't be in a relationship where you wall yourself off every time life gets difficult. That's not partnership. That's isolation with occasional visits." The words stung because they were true. Calan hung up feeling shaken, angry at himself more than her. That evening he sat with Mr. Demir over tea, explaining the argument. "My father was like you," the old man said. "Proud, independent. He worked himself into an early grave, refusing help from anyone. When he died, we found money hidden in his walls, savings he'd never touched, never told anyone about, because asking for help or accepting it felt like failure." "What's your point?" "My point is that pride killed him. Not literally, but it robbed him of years he could have had if he'd just learned to accept love and support from the people who cared about him." Mr. Demir leaned forward. "You're repeating his mistakes, Calan. This woman loves you. She wants to help. Why is that so threatening?" Calan had no answer. He went home and lay awake that night, wrestling with himself. His father had been the same way, working multiple jobs, never asking for help, wearing his independence like armor. Calan had watched him age prematurely from stress, watched him miss family moments because he was always working, always proving he could handle everything alone. Was he really going to do the same thing? Teach Rosie that accepting help was weakness, that love came with the condition that you never needed anything from anyone. The next morning he called Genevieve. "I'm sorry, you were right. This isn't about the car. I know. I don't know how to accept help. I don't know how to be in a relationship where I'm not the one providing everything. It makes me feel like less of a man." Yes, that's programming, Calan. Old messages that don't serve you anymore. Real strength isn't refusing help. It's knowing when to accept it. It's being vulnerable enough to let someone care for you. They agreed on a compromise. She'd lend him the money for the repair, and he'd pay it back over time. Not because he had to, but because he needed to for his own sense of dignity. Genevieve accepted this, understanding it was about more than money. But the conversation had opened something larger between them. Trust. The willingness to be vulnerable. The acceptance that partnership meant interdependence, not just two independent people existing in parallel. A week later, Genevieve took another step. She invited Calan to her home for dinner and presented him with something, a key to this house, she said. "I'm not asking you to move in, not yet, but I want you to know you always have a place here. Both of you, this isn't just my home anymore. It's ours if you want it to be." Calan took the key, feeling its weight in his palm. It was symbolic of so much more than access to a building. It was trust, commitment, a future being offered. "I love you," he said, the words feeling inadequate for everything he felt. "I need you to know that. I love you, and I'm learning, slowly, to accept that you love me too. I do love you. So much." Genevieve's eyes shone with emotion. "We're figuring this out together. That's all we can do." They embraced in her beautiful, no longer empty house, and Calan felt something shift in his chest. Not the dissolution of fear that would take time, but the beginning of acceptance. He could be loved despite his limitations. He could accept help without losing himself. He could build a life with this woman that honored both their worlds. Rosie appeared in the doorway, having been exploring the library. She saw them holding each other and smiled. "Are you guys okay now?" "Yeah, sweetheart," Calan said, reaching out to include her in their embrace. "We're okay. Good," Rosie said, squeezing between them. "Because I really like it here, and I was hoping we could come back." "Anytime you want," Genevieve promised, kissing the top of her head. "This is your place too now." The three of them stood together, an unconventional family formed not by blood or circumstance, but by choice, by the courage to try despite fear, by love that refused to be limited by bank accounts or social expectations. It wasn't perfect. They still had obstacles to navigate, compromises to make, moments when their different backgrounds would create friction. But they had something more important than perfection. They had commitment. They had honesty. They had each other. 6 months later, on a Tuesday morning in early spring, Calan woke in his own apartment with sunlight streaming through the window. Some things hadn't changed. He still lived in the same modest 2-bedroom, still worked his 2 jobs, still drove Rosie to school every morning. But everything felt different now, lighter, full of possibility. Genevieve's foundation had officially launched 2 months ago. Calan served on the advisory board, providing insight into what single parents actually needed. Not handouts, but strategic support that maintained dignity while offering real help. Childcare assistance, job training programs, emergency funds for car repairs and medical bills. The things that made the difference between surviving and thriving. Working alongside Genevieve, he discovered something unexpected. His experience had value beyond his paycheck. The struggles he'd faced, the solutions he'd found, the reality he knew so well, all of it mattered. His voice carried weight in those boardroom meetings, not despite his background, but because of it. The foundation had already helped 43 families in the local area. 43 parents who now had a little more breathing room, a little more hope. Calan thought about them often, remembered being in their position. and felt grateful he could help create something meaningful. On Tuesday afternoons, he still went to Sterling's Café, but now Genevieve went with him, and sometimes Rosie joined them after school. Their table by the window had become a regular fixture. Kendrick always had their orders ready, always smiled at the sight of them together. Today, though, was just the two of them. Rosie was on a field trip with her class, exploring a local architecture firm, an opportunity Genevieve had quietly arranged through her connections, though she'd insisted Rosie earn the spot through her excellent project work. "How does it feel?" Genevieve asked, stirring her coffee. 6 months since we almost threw it all away, like a lifetime ago. And also like yesterday. Calan reached across the table for her hand. "I'm glad we fought through it. Through my stubborn pride and fear." "Our stubborn pride and fear," she corrected gently. "I wasn't exactly forthcoming from the start. We both had to learn how to be honest." They sat in comfortable silence, watching people pass on the sidewalk. Spring was painting the city green again. Trees budding, flowers appearing in window boxes, the world renewing itself. "I've been thinking," Genevieve said, "about the future, about what comes next for us." Calan's heart quickened, but not with fear, with anticipation. "Sebastian is coming to visit next month," she continued. "He wants to meet you and Rosie. Says it's time he got to know the people who've made his mother happy again." "I'd like that. And I've been wondering," no pressure, just thinking out loud, "whether you and Rosie might want to spend more time at the house. Not moving in necessarily, but maybe staying over on weekends, making it feel more like a shared space rather than just somewhere you visit." Calan considered this carefully. 6 months ago, the suggestion would have terrified him. Now it felt like a natural progression. "I think Rosie would love that. The library alone is worth it," he smiled. "And I would too, as long as we keep this place, keep our own space. Of course. I'm not trying to erase your life, Calan. I'm trying to join it, I know. And I'm learning to let you." They finished their coffee and walked to his car, hands clasped. The spring air was cool but promising warmth. Everything felt full of potential. Not the naive optimism of new love, but the steady confidence of love that had been tested and survived. That evening, the three of them had dinner together at Genevieve's house. Rosie showed them her latest architectural sketches, increasingly sophisticated designs that reflected her growing understanding of form and function. Genevieve offered thoughtful feedback, pointing out where the engineering would need support, where the aesthetics could be refined. Calan watched them together and felt his chest swell with gratitude. This strange, unexpected family they'd built, it worked. Not perfectly, not without effort, but it worked. After Rosie went to bed in the guest room that had quietly become her room at Genevieve's house, Calan and Genevieve sat on the back patio, wrapped in blankets against the cool evening air. "Thank you," Calan said. "For what?" "For being patient with me. For not giving up when I pushed you away. For seeing something in me worth staying for. Thank you for letting me in. For taking the risk. For teaching me that real connection doesn't require perfection, just honesty and commitment." They sat together under the stars, two people from different worlds, who'd found common ground in an embrace born of panic and desperation at a coffee shop on an ordinary Tuesday. That moment had changed everything, not because it was grand or dramatic, but because it was real. Sometimes life did give you a second chance when you least expected it. Sometimes a moment of pure instinct opened doors you'd never imagined walking through. Sometimes the courage to be vulnerable, to accept love despite your fears, to build something new from broken pieces. Sometimes that courage was rewarded with joy. Calan had learned that showing up wasn't just about fulfilling obligations. It was about being present for the moments that mattered, even when they scared you. Especially when they scared you. He'd shown up for Rosie every day of her life. He'd shown up for his work, his responsibilities, his commitments. And finally, he'd shown up for love, messy, complicated, beautiful love with a woman who saw him completely and chose him anyway. In his pocket, he carried his old wallet, worn leather, 12 years old, holding Rosie's photo and now a picture of the three of them together. Simple treasures marking a life well lived. not because it was perfect or wealthy, but because it was real, and that, in the end, was the richest thing of all.